101.1 FM. Our conversation with Senator Joe Pittman, brought to you by Marcus and Mack, a law firm representing injured people. Senator, good morning.
Todd, good morning to you.
Good to have you back with us here today.
It's good to be back.
As I said to Representative Struzzi last week, it's not as if there's nothing to talk about now.
Plenty to discuss. Yeah, we are off to the races, as they would say.
Yeah, the governor's budget address last week, and from your standpoint, I'm not going to try to put words in your mouth. What's your reaction to some of the things that you heard? There are obvious problems that you have with it.
Well, there are problems with it from my perspective, but you know, at the end of the day, we have to come to terms with the governor and the House of Representatives to craft a budget. And if it were up to us in the Senate, there's 50 of us. In a perfect world, we'd come up with 50 different budgets. So the reality of the budget is give and take. There are some things in there that concern me very much. I really am getting concerned about this discussion over not only the carbon tax, but also the severance tax on Marcellus Shale. I really worry that just the very conversation is driving investment out of our state and causing those who are here to think twice about continuing to invest in producing energy in our Commonwealth. And so that really worries me. I just, you know, employers more than anything want certainty. And when they hear about carbon taxes and severance taxes and those kinds of things, it makes them wonder if it's worth their time and effort to continue to operate here in Pennsylvania. So that's a big worry. I worry about the municipal police tax. I get his point, and you know, to the defense of Governor Wolf, this is something that governors, Republican and Democrat, have been proposing for 25 years. And there are certain municipalities that it could be argued are receiving state police service that would have the capacity to generate their own local police force. But it is not cheap to run a local police force. And the vast majority of the 41st District, these are small municipalities that just do not have the capacity to support a police force on their own. And we're already paying the taxes to support the good work that the state police do. I don't think we should be double taxed on it.
And it's triple tax for municipalities that have police forces of their own now, because the governor has proposed that in the latest iteration, even municipalities that have a police force, such as Indiana Borough, would have to pay the fee.
Yeah, and that part is really mind-numbing to me. I mean, so here you are, Indiana Borough. It's strained financially as it is. It's taken the steps it needs to operate a very effective full-time police force, which as a resident of the borough, I very much appreciate. I'm not sure why they should have to pay additional for state police services. If I saw the numbers correctly, it'd be about $120,000 annually. I mean, that's just not a sustainable hit on this municipality in particular.
I want to go back to the Reggie Regulations. Last week, the governor did direct DEP to move forward with the next step of his implementation of the executive order to make Reggie become Pennsylvania's way of doing business. And as I asked Representative Struzzi, I'll ask you in the same way. Bills take a long time to pass. And of course, if they do pass, they make it to the governor's desk. He has to sign it. If not, you have to try to override it with a veto. That's a long, drawn-out process, and here he is moving forward already. As I asked Representative Struzzi, is the consideration being given to going to court to stop it? Because it seems like for the legislature to have a voice in it, that's going to happen.
You're right, Todd. The reality is, as I've always seen this, is that this will be tied up with the budget. The only way we're going to get the governor to sign our legislation is to convince him that this is bad policy for Pennsylvania and also understand what his additional priorities are. And I am hoping through all of the grassroots efforts that we're developing, the trade unions in particular, who have really expressed their concern to the governor about this very issue, because their livelihoods are on the line too. I mean, we're talking about blue-collar, family-sustaining jobs, and it's really concerning that he continues to talk about and move forward with these proposed regulations. Now, at the end of the day, proposed regulations also take a very long time. But I go back to what I said earlier about generating this overall uncertainty within the state about the environment with which electric generators can operate. And if they continue to see this attack on what they do, I worry about their stability, whether or not Reggie becomes implemented or not.
Yeah.
Very concerning.
This next year is going to be, watching that unfold is going to be really something. Away from what the governor said about the budget, let's talk more about what the legislature is doing in budget talks, because the committee hearings, the budget hearings will start next week. You and Representative Struzzi both sit in your respective appropriations committees, so you'll be involved in these discussions. Higher education funding, particularly the state system of higher education, that system is, it seems under Chancellor Greenstein, doing everything they possibly can to find ways to operate more efficiently and to make themselves viable again. And whether or not they're going to be able to do it really depends, I think, upon what's going to happen over the next 6 months to a year in the state legislature.
Yeah, another very big topic. And, you know, we have the 14 schools of the state system. We have the demographic realities across our state. We have the economic realities where, in many cases, young kids can come out of college or out of high school now and go into the trades or go into a field that's more of technical nature and find a good solid wage. So we need to really adapt our entire higher education system. And one of the things I think we've lost sight of is, yes, we're talking about the 14 state system schools. Yes, those are the schools we own. But when you look at higher education overall, when you look at Penn State and their branch campuses, when you look at Pitt and their branch campuses, when you look at all the private schools and all the community colleges, I mean, we have a lot of supply when it comes to higher education. And I think we're missing a bit of a boat here when we're not talking about the entire spectrum of it and what we need to do to make sure it's more agile, it's right-sized, and it fits the demands of today's economy.
Yeah.
But that's a big issue, and you know, part of me wants to support IUP and the state system's efforts by putting additional dollars into it, and parochially you look at the economic engine that IUP is, and we absolutely need to do that. But then I also have to look at the big picture and say, you know, is this continuing to be a wise investment broadly for the taxpayer? And it's a tough balance to reach.
It really is. It's not something you solve in a year either.
No, it's not.
It's something that requires an awful lot of work. Okay, so let's talk about some other priorities that you want to have in the 6 months of this year. Of course, we'll get to the election season here pretty soon, which means that our monthly visits, because of the primary campaign, our monthly visits will have to cease 45 days out from the primary election.
Oh, okay.
So we're only going to get a couple of more conversations with you before that 45 days kicks in. So let's talk about the next 6 months and what you want to see happening.
Well, we have a lot going on beyond the discussions of Reggie and whatnot. I really want to dive into the new committee assignment I received as chair of Urban Affairs and Housing Committee. I want to look at what we can do to try and enhance community reinvestment in residential neighborhoods. I think that's very important. We continue to watch our revenue numbers through the fiscal year, which right now remain quite good. And once we have a better picture through February and March, I'm hoping that we can move my legislation to advance funding for the state police out of our general fund and free up the motor license fund dollars that go to roads and bridges. You know, we still have a lot of work to do in our infrastructure, and budgeting is about priorities. And I think we have long done the motoring public a disservice by pulling hundreds of millions of dollars every year out of the highway budget to fund the state police. Not that the state police don't deserve every penny, but that's something that we should be funding out of our general fund. So that's another initiative. And then I have a couple bills that I'm hoping to introduce here within the next few days relating to the never-ending discussion of broadband. We've talked a lot about broadband, and as we've continued this, I've come to the realization it's not just about money. There are a lot of bureaucratic issues, red tape issues that many in the broadband field run into. And I think a big part of what we can do to enhance broadband service is get rid of that red tape and give them a better runway to do their job.
Mm-hmm. That's a pretty important thing because every day we hear another story about how broadband is so essential, and there are great advances, and the 5G thing is going to really change the whole world.
Right.
But every single one of them costs a ton of money.
That's right.
And finding that money is really going to be a problem. In the district, you had a number of meetings last fall in Butler County. What's your schedule for more meetings, more town hall meetings?
Yeah, we haven't set the dates for them yet, but we're looking at Murraysville and then the communities around Murraysville and then southern Armstrong County to line those up in the spring. So that'll be coming out here shortly. We needed to get the rest of the session schedule in place so we understood what our possibilities are. We have to set those pretty far in advance so we can prepare. And, that's a very big populous area. Murraysville, for example, is the single biggest municipality in this senatorial district. There's 20,000 people there.
Yeah.
So that municipality in itself will be the next town meeting that we have. And the last thing I do want to put a plug in for, Todd, we've talked about it before, but these next 60 days are very important when it comes to answering the census.
Yeah.
We must answer the census. We talk a lot about how important it is to vote. I would equate answering the census to be just as important because that is your voice and it's locked in for a decade. And it affects so many things, especially your representation in Harrisburg and Washington, D.C. And for every person that does not respond to the census, that's another person that we have to find in our legislative district, which means it just gets that much bigger. Yeah. Not to mention all the financial implications through funding streams and whatnot. So I just want to plead to the viewers to pay attention to the census and be sure to answer it.
Absolutely. In fact, we're going to be talking about the census with Stephanie Walters and maybe some others in our next half hour.
Good.
So we're trying to stay on top of that because it is extremely important.
Yep.
Senator, thanks so much for coming in.
Todd, thank you very much.
We appreciate it.
All right.
It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS, AM 1160 and 101.1 FM. And it's 9:25 in the morning.